Welcome back to Part 4, where Captain Musgrave is gearing up for the ultimate game of Can We Not Die Today? Armed with little more than a scrap of hope, a boat held together by prayers and elbow grease, and the determination of a man who's had just about enough of being stranded, Musgrave is ready to brave the deadly waters of the Auckland Isles. Picture this. The crew, clad in sealskin fashion that's more wet dog chic than functional, is preparing a DIY boat that looks like it might float, or disintegrate into driftwood at the first wave. But hey, when the choice is between sitting on a desolate rock forever, or risking it all, you grab your soggy boots, your makeshift oars, and go for broke. In this episode of Castaway on the Auckland Isles, a narrative of the wreck of the Grafton, we follow Musgrave and his merry band of miserable sailors as they channel their inner Noahs, minus the divine blueprints, to cross the stormy seas to salvation. Will their leaky little craft hold together? Will they discover that sealskin isn't exactly waterproof? And most importantly, will they finally get a proper meal that doesn't smell like low tide? Tune in for the hilarious, heart-pounding tale of survival, determination, and the sheer willpower to make it out alive, even if it means navigating waters that are colder than a penguin's handshake. But if life and health are spared me, I will not remain here another 12 months. If necessary, I will go to sea in a boat and drown like a rat, which would be the most likely outcome. I cannot consider such a death suicide, though some who understand the risks might call it systematic self-destruction. I hope it will not come to that. Sunday, September 11th, 1864. If we had any carpenter's tools, we could soon knock up something that would carry us to New Zealand out of the wreck of the Grafton, even if it were only a scow. Mr. Raynal has been shoemaking for the last fortnight. He has made a pair for himself and a pair for me, and considering the material he had to work with, sealskin uppers and old boots picked apart for soles, and that he had no prior experience, he has done a surprisingly good job. The sealskin, however, is too thin for moccasins. We wear out a pair in 5 days or a week. The men make wooden clogs, but those are very dangerous on the rocky beach. The weather has continued fine. Winds have been moderate to strong from the south or eastward throughout the week, and the atmosphere has been moderately clear. The barometer was as low as 29.50, but is now rising at 29.90. Thermometer between 40 and 50 degrees at noon each day. Sunday, September 18th, 1864. The weather has been very stormy this week, with nearly constant hail, snow, or rain. We are again hard-pressed for food. Despite the terrible weather, we've had to venture out in search of provisions. This week, we were out in the boat 3 days in a row, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, from 4 in the morning until 6 at night. Through sheer perseverance, we managed to get enough widgeon, fish, and mussels to sustain ourselves for a couple of days, with only a small surplus that will barely last us through today. Tomorrow we must head out again in the boat, no matter what the weather brings, and it is not looking promising. The barometer is very low, suggesting a heavy southwest gale is on the way. About 3 weeks ago, I had great hopes when I saw such large numbers of seals in the harbor. I thought we might have a steady supply of meat, but I was sadly mistaken. It seems they were only gathering for a final leave-taking. At present, there isn't a single seal in this part of the harbor. We plan to go up to the northern arm as soon as the weather subsides a little. Seals were plentiful there during our last visit, but it is 12 miles away. A significant undertaking for us. The current state of the weather has prevented us from working on our new place, as we spend nearly all of our time looking for food. We do have dried meat and widgeon, but it is almost inedible. If we are forced to eat it, I would sooner try to survive on roots alone. I must give credit to the men, despite our hard fare, which is surely worse than anyone reading this journal could imagine. They have yet to make any open complaints. However, They have been constantly pulling the boat in storms and wet weather, sometimes all day long, only to return with scarcely enough to keep us alive. Wednesday, September 21st, 1864. On Monday morning, the weather looked promising, despite the barometer being very low, which suggested otherwise. Food being so scarce, I decided to risk heading for the western arm. The southwest wind was against us, so we made slow progress. By nightfall, we had only reached a spot about 8 miles from the house. Here, we spotted a seal on shore. We landed and killed it, and shortly after, we found another, though it led us on a chase until dark, and we nearly lost it. Both were old seals. We decided to camp there overnight and go farther up in the morning to look for more. However, the weather turned during the night, bringing heavy hail, rain, and bitter cold. Around midnight, we decided to head home. Despite the gale, the wind was in our favor, and we arrived back at the house around 2 o'clock on Tuesday morning, soaking wet and famished from the cold. Seeing the black seal gives me hope that the others have not entirely left the harbor, but may have gathered at the head of the western arm. We had assumed the black ones had left, as we hadn't seen any for a long time. This day also marked the 10th anniversary of my marriage. Sunday, September 25th, 1864. The gale that began on Wednesday continued blowing hard until Friday evening, with hail, rain, and snow. This week, there has been more snow on the ground than at any other time during the winter. It still lays thick on the mountains, though I don't expect it to last long, as the sun is beginning to feel quite warm again. Yesterday and today have been 2 remarkably fine days, with a light breeze from the south. It would have been an excellent opportunity for a vessel to make the land and enter the harbor, as the atmosphere has been particularly clear. The island could have been seen from a great distance. Nevertheless, I don't expect anyone to come before the 15th of next month. After that, I will look for a ship every day, assuming we are not starved to death before then. It is now evident that the seals have completely left this part of the island. We were out in the boat yesterday, but didn't see a single one. I have often thought I could cross to the western shore of the island through a valley at the head of the bay, which I estimate to be no more than 3 miles across. Yesterday, after breakfast, we took the boat and landed at the spot I intended to cross. The 3 men with me started the trek, but the terrain was so terrible that 2 turned back after half a mile. The remaining man and I pressed on, crawling more often than walking. In total, we managed to travel about a mile farther, spending most of the time on our bellies, rarely able to get up on our hands and knees. I have described some bad roads before, but this one defies description. It also defeated me. This is the first time I have been beaten trying to get through the infernal scrub and swamp. The journey of just 1.5 miles took us 7 hours to complete. I returned with a severe cold as my only reward, along with scratches on my face and hands. On the way back, I managed to shoot 3 widgeon and 2 young ducks. Sunday, October 2nd, 1864. The long-awaited month has arrived at last. God grant us relief before it passes. Today marks 9 months since the wreck of the Grafton. I will make no further comments on how these months have passed, as it could only rekindle the internal fire that has nearly consumed me. Fresh hopes have somewhat quenched that fire, though it would take little to make it burn fiercely again. On Monday morning, the weather looked promising, despite the barometer being uncertain. We set out early for the western arm in search of fresh meat, and fortunately, we did not have to go farther than its entrance. Sunday, October 2nd, 1864. On the small island, we found and killed 4 seals, and among them was our old acquaintance, Royal Tom. Had meat not been so scarce, we would not have killed him. Another was a great calf, about 4 months old. We had killed a cow and milk the previous Monday, which was no doubt its mother, This is the only instance we have found of seals having calves later than January. I should say December is the month in which they generally calve. I am inclined to think that these seals, along with the 2 we killed the week before, made up a family. Perhaps they stayed behind because of the young calf, and did not depart with the others. I greatly fear the seals have all left, as we have not seen a single sign of any others. However, it is to be hoped these few will last us until we are taken away, a rescue I fully expect between the 15th and 20th of this month. If anyone has exerted themselves on our behalf, I have no doubt the government would have dispatched a vessel not later than the 1st of this month, after the equinoctial gales subsided. Had we not been so fortunate on Monday to find these seals as quickly as we did, we would not have been able to return yet, for it has blown a gale ever since. At 9 a.m. on Monday, a breeze came from the northeast, increasing rapidly to a gale. This is only the second northeast wind we have experienced outside of the full moon, and both instances occurred near the last quarter. This one, however, did not last long before hauling by north to the westward, where it has continued to blow very heavily between southwest and west-northwest. It is now at northwest, with the barometer at 30.20. Once again, a low barometer preceded a southwest gale, but this is the first time I have seen the barometer above 30 inches with a northwest wind. A great deal of rain has also fallen this week, and at one point it rained harder for 2 hours than I ever remember seeing anywhere, except perhaps during those heavy showers occasionally experienced on the equator. The thermometer has remained low, between 36 and 40 degrees. Sunday, October 9th, 1864, the past week until Friday, was very fine. There were light northwest winds, and though the sky remained generally clouded, the atmosphere was particularly clear. It would have been an excellent opportunity for a ship to make the island and get in here. I hope we will have moderate weather for a time, as last month was certainly bad enough to suffice for a while. Still, I suppose we must take it as it comes, without grumbling. The barometer is now at 30.20, so we will likely have good weather for a few days. And in that time, who knows what might transpire? Perhaps we will be taken away before more bad weather arrives. At midnight on Thursday, it began to rain and continued without ceasing until midnight on Friday. At 4 p.m. on Friday, the wind shifted instantaneously from northwest to southeast, and has remained between southeast and south-southeast ever since. It has been a moderate breeze with passing clouds and frequent snow showers. The hilltops are once again capped with white, and the cold is intense. The thermometer reads 38 degrees. Earlier this week, we planted some pumpkin seeds, though I doubt they will stand much chance. We tried the same last summer. They sprouted, but that was all. Corn, I believe, would grow very well here, and so would potatoes. We have a few potatoes that we plan to try. Sunday, October 16th, 1864. Another week of fine weather has passed, and yet here we remain. Surely no more than another week at most will go by before something arrives to take us away, if anyone has given thought to us, or done anything to have us looked after. I fear that those who should have felt concern for our fate are either dead or asleep, for had they acted promptly, we would not still be here. I made clear before leaving that an accident was far more likely to happen in harbor than at sea, and those in Sydney should have known this. Surely their consciences cannot allow them to rest without discovering what has become of us. They cannot know that their personal interests might also be at stake. This alone should have spurred them to action. Still, I do not doubt that something is being done toward finding us. I may question their energy, for if they had applied to the government as soon as they gave us up, which could not have been later than 5 months after we sailed, I feel certain we would have received relief by now. In such humane times, the possibility of saving 5 men would be a matter of immediate public interest and action. Perhaps I am being too harsh. I will say no more on the subject for now. The weather this past week has been fine. On Monday morning, The snow lay thick on the ground, but the sun quickly dispersed it. That afternoon, a strong breeze came from the west and lasted until midnight. Since then, the wind has been light, blowing mostly from the south and southeast, with scattered cloud. The weather this past week has been fine. On Monday morning, the snow lay thick on the ground, but the sun quickly dispersed it. That afternoon, a strong breeze came from the west and lasted until midnight. Since then, the wind has been light, blowing mostly from the south and southeast with scattered clouds. However, the mist continues to envelop the high parts of the island almost constantly. Sunday, October 23rd, 1864. Today, the wind is moderate from the north-northeast, with passing clouds and a clear atmosphere. The barometer has been steadily rising all week, from 29.50 on Monday to 29.90 today. The thermometer stands at 53 degrees, which is below temperate, but we feel it quite warm. The weather has been so fine, and I am so weary of being here, that Reynal and I proposed taking the boat to try to reach New Zealand. However, the men immediately opposed this idea, as they did not wish to be left alone here. As I do not want to risk anyone's life unnecessarily, except perhaps my own, and since relief may not, after all, be so far off, I have abandoned the idea for now. Perhaps I am being unreasonably uneasy, but it is impossible for me to feel otherwise. On Monday morning, we started at daybreak for the western arm to look for seals. On Masked Island, we saw one tiger seal, but we couldn't get him, and he was the only one we saw until we reached the head of the arm. Around noon, we landed, made a fire, and had something to eat before continuing on our way. However, shortly after noon, we encountered a strong westerly breeze right on our nose, which slowed us down considerably. We are very unfortunate. Every time we go out in the boat, a gale seems to come on before we can return. By about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we had managed to make our way nearly to the head of the arm. There, we saw a large black seal lying among the rocks, very close to the water. It was so near the edge that landing to attack him would have been impossible. Food has become so scarce that we were grateful even for half a chance to get him, and fearful that he would escape, leaving us empty-handed. The seal wasn't asleep. He sat up and watched us, and we lay on our oars watching him, hardly daring to move for fear he would slip into the water. A musket ball has little effect on seals near the water. At best it may stun or confuse them, but you must be ready to attack with clubs immediately, and we were still too far away to risk a shot. We made a few bold strokes toward him. He remained still until the boat nearly touched the beach. Then he bolted. Reynal fired the musket, and though the shot staggered him, knocking out 3 of his canine teeth and sending the ball up into his head, it did not kill him. We were on him in an instant with our clubs, stunning him briefly, but seals are extraordinarily tenacious of life. The very time we spent pounding him to ensure his death gave him time to revive, and he nearly made it back into the water before we could cut his throat. He was a very large seal. One of his teeth measured 3.5 inches in length, 11 inches in circumference at the gum, and 5.5 inches at the base. Reynal has some teeth even larger than this. It is a surprising fact that the closer a seal is to the water, the harder it is to kill. I have seen a black bull seal with 2 bullets in him, his head split open with an axe, and his brains hanging out, still dragging men along the beach as they tried to hold him back by his hind flippers. He would have escaped into the water if another man had not come to their assistance and chopped his head clean off with the axe. At any distance from the water, however, a light tap on the nose will often stun them, and if struck immediately afterward, they will likely die without the slightest muscular movement. It is critical to make sure of your blow, for if you miss, they will grab hold of you, and their bite would easily break any limb they catch. None of us have been bitten yet, thank God, but on 1 or 2 occasions, seals have managed to wrench the clubs right out of our hands. After securing our seal in the boat, we proceeded to the western head, the entrance to the arm, where we killed another black seal. There we saw 3 more on shore, which we could easily have taken, but the 2 we had already killed were as much as the boat could carry. We also spotted about half a dozen seals in the water, all black bulls. Not long ago we thought it would be impossible to eat these black seals. The smell of the meat is enough to disgust and even stifle a person. But what are starving men to do? Hunger is certainly a powerful sauce. We were all in a state of excitement over the first seal we killed, afraid we would lose him and not be able to find another. After taking a good look at the entrance to the western arm, we set sail for home, or, as I must call it, my prison house. With a strong fair wind, we carried as much sail as the boat could handle, and made the return trip in 2.5 hours, arriving about an hour after dark. The distance is 14 or 15 miles. I should take this opportunity to describe the western arm of this vast harbor, as I believe I have not yet done so. About 7 miles from the eastern entrance heads lies Musgrave's Peninsula, which runs nearly at right angles to the entrance and Flagstaff Point. Its southeast entrance bears from the heads west by half south. Our signal board is erected here. The elbow of the arm, point number 1, turns southwest by west for about 5 miles to point number 2. From here, it changes direction to west-northwest for about 2 miles to point number 3. The arm then follows roughly the same bearing along the northern shore to its head, about 3.25 miles further, from point number 3 to Break Sea Point, which lies on the eastern side of the passage leading out, is about 1.75 miles west by half north. On the eastern side of the passage, 2 isolated rocks stand no less than 300 feet high, which, from the seaward view, would appear to be a part of the general rock charted as South Adams Rock. I am convinced this entrance, Sunday, October 23rd, 1864, week passes on after week. Another one has passed like its predecessors, and thus I suppose it will continue till time shall be no more. Each day slips by, and we know not what the next may bring, or whether we shall live to see it. Perhaps one of the greatest blessings of Providence is the veil that conceals the future. My eyes are now weak and bloodshot from constant strain and anxious watching. Since last Sunday, I have scarcely slept. Day and night, I have been on edge, constantly expecting a vessel to come into view. The first part of the week was moderate, but since Friday noon, it has been blowing a hard gale from the southwest and west-northwest, with heavy rain and thick, dirty weather. There is not the slightest sign of it letting up, and if a vessel were near the island, it would be impossible for her to get in. It would be impossible for me to express my current state of mind. I am anything but mad. Perhaps if I were, it would bring a kind of relief. Forgetfulness would be a mercy. I was mad once, and people are undoubtedly held accountable for their actions in such states of madness. Perhaps I am now suffering the just punishment for my folly. Still, I find comfort in the beautiful words of Thomas More. Let fate do her worst. There are relics of joy, bright gems of the past which she cannot destroy, that come in the night time of sorrow and care, and bring back the features that joy used to wear. Long, long may my heart with such memories be filled, like a vase in which roses have once been distilled. You may break, you may ruin the vase if you will, but the scent of the roses will hang round it still. On Tuesday morning, Reynal and I set off at 5 o'clock to climb the mountains to the northward and look around. The night had been beautifully clear and calm, and when we started there was not a cloud in the sky. A finer morning could not have been imagined, but as we ascended, clouds began to rise quickly from the west and covered the sky, turning everything gray and dim. From the summit, we had a clear view of the land and sea surrounding us. To the northeast, I could see chasms and dangerous sunken rocks scattered around the entrances. These rocks are treacherous and do not always show, lying hidden beneath the waves. This part of the coastline must be approached with extreme caution. In the distance, perhaps 10 miles offshore, I could see faint outlines of other islands, a tantalizing sight that made our isolation feel even more pronounced. As we descended, we set fire to the dry grass on the homeward side of the mountains. The fire burned well into the night, and would have served as an excellent beacon for any vessel in the vicinity. When the weather moderates, we will have to go out again in search of seals, if there are any left. I suspect the few black seals we've been able to find will soon depart as well. I am trying to tan the largest of the 2 skins we brought back last week. I have found a bark that I hope will work well, and if it succeeds, the skin will make excellent sole leather. We are not yet entirely dressed in sealskin clothing, but our clothes look utterly deplorable. They are neither ragged nor dirty, but they are patched so extensively that barely a scrap of the original fabric remains. Joseph's coat would pale in comparison to ours. We use anything we can find: old canvas, gunny bags, anything for patches. Canvas threads are unraveled to serve as stitching, and everything is sewn together with sail needles. We are a motley group indeed. I have even cut up all my bed sheets for patches, and expect I will soon have to resort to canvas or burlap. Reynal and I continue to work on our new place, but much of our time there is spent straining our eyes, looking down the harbor for any sign of a sail. The barometer has fluctuated all week between 29.10 and 29.90, and now stands at 29.53. Thermometer, 38 degrees. Sunday, October 30th, 1864. Here we remain yet, closely clasped in Sarah's bosom. I do not think I will have reason to fear purgatory after this. I trust my penance is being paid now, and it is nearly complete, for things appear to be drawing to a crisis. There is a saying that when things are at their worst, they must mend. But how bad that worst may yet be is beyond the reach of human knowledge. I must now let go of about the last small comfort I had, writing on Sundays. If I continue, my only remaining blank book will soon be filled. I must save the few remaining pages for something truly momentous, should it occur. So, my dear old journal, I must bid you farewell for now, and God only knows for how long. If no vessel arrives to rescue us, we will begin, come the new year, to pull the Grafton apart and try to fashion something seaworthy out of her bones. I have grave doubts about the success of this endeavor, but what other choice do we have? It will be an undertaking born of desperation, but at this point even the slimmest hope must be pursued. The seals are very scarce and in all probability abandon the place entirely, Sunday, November 13th, 1864. If we had had tools, I should have tried long ago to see what could be done with the wreck. But who would have expected that we'd be left here, ignored and forgotten, like so many stray dogs? It's folly for me to brood over this. I must let it pass. Our tools consist of an American axe, an adze, a hammer, and a gimlet. A mighty collection to dismantle a ship and build another one, especially with no carpenter or blacksmith among us. The idea is almost farcical. Still, as I've said before, I would sooner put to sea on a log than continue dragging out this miserable existence, and I'm not even certain how much longer we will be able to survive here. The weather has been dreadful all week, save for Wednesday. Constant heavy rain battered us until Friday evening, driven by a gale from the westward. That night, the wind shifted suddenly to the south-southwest, and the rain turned to snow, which fell heavily, and now lies thick upon the ground. The entire landscape is dark, cold, and cheerless. On Wednesday, desperate for food, we ventured out, 4 of us together with the gun, almost without breakfast. It was a dirty, wet day, and too windy to take the boat. We traveled nearly 10 miles without any success. Our hopes of finding Widgeon were dashed, and we trudged on, hungry and dispirited. At one point, we came across some mussels, but it was high tide, and we couldn't reach them. We tried fishing instead, but managed to catch only 2 tiny fish, no larger than sprats. By 3 in the afternoon, the tide had receded enough for us to wade into the water and gather some mussels. We roasted and ate them on the spot, but I fear I ate too many after such prolonged fasting. Combined with the exhaustion from walking so far, this likely made me ill. On our way home, we were fortunate enough to encounter 2 tiger seals and kill them. Without these, I truly believe we would have starved, as the weather has prevented us from getting anything else. The next morning, Tuesday, we launched the boat despite a heavy gale and driving rain. With a fair wind, we sailed to where the seals were. The piece of meat we brought home the night before had served as our supper and breakfast. We managed to load the seals into the boat without much trouble, but rowing back was another story. It took us 5 hours of relentless pulling to cover the mere 2.5-mile distance back to the house. By the time we arrived, we were drenched to the skin, and I have suffered from a severe cold ever since. The barometer has been as low as 29 inches and now stands at 29.50. The thermometer reads 31 degrees, just below freezing. November 28th, 1864. Strong gale from the northwest. Hail, sleet, and snow are falling heavily. The barometer sits at 29.30. December 1st, 1864. Snow and ice cover the mountains. Frost continues, with the thermometer at 32 degrees. December 6th to 21st, 1864. We've had remarkably fine weather all month. The tides are low and the winds have turned easterly. On December 19th, the thermometer rose to 56 degrees, 1 degree above temperate, and we've had calm, clear days since Christmas. It feels almost miraculous. A ship could have come in at any time this month, as the weather has been as fine as any I've seen. The barometer remains steady at 30 inches, and the thermometer holds at 60 degrees at noon. Sunday, January 1st, 1865. A whole year has now passed since I first anchored in this place, and I suspect another will pass before we are free, unless some sealers arrive by chance. I have gone quite gray-headed, and now my hair is falling out in handfuls. Whether it will grow back or I will remain bald, only time will tell. Since my last entry, I've been plagued by painful boils on my face, but they are slowly healing. Fortunately, the men remain healthy, which is a blessing, as we have no medicine, no salts, no remedies, only hard exercise to keep us going. Exercise has been our salvation. It dispels gloom, keeps us cheerful, and promotes health. I encourage the men to remain active and keep them busy with tasks that are both useful and, when possible, a little entertaining. Providence continues to be kind, for our fortunes have turned. The bull seals returned at the beginning of November, 3 or 4 of them, bold and aggressive. Though they have not yet coupled, they are easy to hunt. They come out of the water to chase us, allowing us to lure them onto the shore where we can kill them. These seals are enormous, easily as large as the ones we saw on Campbell's Island. They seem to have lost considerable fat, likely due to the poor quality of food here compared to wherever they've been. Our plan now is to dismantle the Grafton and try to build something seaworthy from her remains. It is an ambitious project, and though I have no experience with shipbuilding, I remain hopeful. With energy and perseverance, men can achieve wonders, and I will not abandon hope. Sunday, March 13th, 1865. It has been more than a month since I last wrote, and during that time, we have been busily engaged in our shipbuilding endeavor. Sadly, I have been of little use. For nearly 3 weeks, I have had one or both hands in a sling due to boils. I am just now beginning to regain their use. We have managed to prepare the keel, the stem, and the stern post, along with a number of timbers ready to bolt together. However, we are now at a standstill. Reynal's ingenuity has been remarkable. With nothing more than 2 picks and a few shovel blades for steel, he has made saws, chisels, gouges, and other tools. His work at the forge has far exceeded my expectations, but when it came to making augers, he was defeated. He labored for 3 days on one, but in the end it was hopeless. When Reynal finally admitted that he could not make the auger, the faces of the men were truly pitiable. They looked as though all hope had died. It was a heavy blow to my heart as well, though I had begun to anticipate it. I knew then that I had no choice but to enact my last resort, attempting to reach Stewart Island in the boat. When I told the men of my plan, they all volunteered to go with me, except the cook. But reluctant to remain alone on the island, he ultimately decided to join us. While it would be better for the boat if fewer men came along, I cannot in good conscience leave anyone behind. With winter fast approaching, it is doubtful that those left here would find enough food to survive. Sunday, March 26, 1865. The sea booms and the wind howls. These sounds have been constant companions in my ears for the past 15 months, broken perhaps only by a fortnight's reprieve in all that time. There is something eerily dismal in the endless roaring of waves and shrieking of wind. Sometimes, even now, it makes my flesh creep to hear them, although I am so used to it. Were the romantic admirers of this wild and sublime kind of thing in my place, I would gladly let them have it. I'm quite certain they would have been satisfied long before now. I wouldn't wish such a fate even upon my greatest enemy. Yes, I have said it before, and now I repeat, we are leaving. If all goes well, this will be the last Sunday, but one that we will spend in this wretched part of Sarah's bosom. And perhaps, God willing, by that time, we will be free altogether. Now it is freedom or death, but I am hopeful. More than that, I have confidence that we will succeed. There is no alternative for us. After such a long imprisonment, we are ready to risk everything to regain our liberty, especially with the specter of starvation driving us forward. Since my last entry, we have worked steadily and tirelessly on the boat. With every ounce of skill and strength we possess, we've pushed ourselves as far as our crude tools allow. If all goes according to plan, we'll be ready to launch her in about 10 more days. We've worked from daylight in the morning until 9:30 at night. Reynal at his forge, hammering and crafting, and I inside the house after dark, working on the sails. We've had to make everything, sails, masts, and rigging, all from the meager materials we have on hand. The other day, a disaster nearly ruined us. I broke our gimlet, the only tool we had for boring holes. Without it, our only option would have been to burn holes into the wood, a tedious and exhausting process, given how many holes were required. For a moment, it felt as though all our efforts had come to nothing, but Reynal, resourceful as ever, managed to repair it. It may not be perfect, but it will do the job, and for that I am profoundly grateful. I haven't mentioned the blowflies and sandflies for some time now, but I assure you they are just as bad, if not worse, than when we first arrived. Working on the beach, we are constantly at the mercy of their vicious attacks. The sandflies are beyond anything I've ever encountered. I have seen mosquitoes bad enough to drive a man mad. I recall a place called Nikari on the coast of Suriname, where a sailor, tormented by mosquitoes, plunged into the sea for relief and was drowned. I've been to many such places where mosquitoes swarm with maddening persistence, but nothing compares to these sandflies. If the wind drops at all, even slightly, they rise up in clouds, covering us in a black swarming mass. They alight on every inch of exposed skin and bite with relentless ferocity. Worse still, they crawl inside our clothes and bite us there. At this very moment, I doubt I could place the point of a needle anywhere on my hands or face that hasn't been bitten. On one occasion, long ago, I was forced to abandon my work on the boat and flee indoors to escape them. But there's no abandoning it now. We must grin and bear it. We must persevere. We are close to finishing the boat, and when she is launched, we will leave this accursed place. We must move to Camp Cove, where the boat can safely lay at anchor. There, we will be ready to seize the first favorable opportunity to put to sea. The seals have all but vanished. We haven't seen a single one in the water for weeks. We are out of time. If we don't leave soon, we will starve. There's no other way to put it. Sunday, April 2nd, 1865. The past week has brought us little progress on the boat. The weather has been wet and boisterous, keeping us from working outside for most of the time. Even with the best conditions, we advance slowly, as our tools are so crude it is almost impossible to make headway. I had hoped we would be ready by now. I gave it 10 days last Sunday, but it's clear we need at least that much time again. Mr. Reynal remains constantly occupied at the forge, as the blacksmithing work is never ending. We need nails, small bolts, and all manner of fastenings, which Reynal must craft one by one. The forge has become a lifeline, and his skill is our only hope of seeing this project through. The greatest challenge this week has not been the boat, however. It has been food. Since we cannot launch the boat to fish, and there is so little to be gathered nearby, we've been in desperate straits. We've had one man out constantly, searching for any scrap of food he could find. Yet for days his efforts were in vain, and things looked grim, until today. It is true. Heaven, all bounteous ever, in boundless mercy sent. Let me recount the day's events. After breakfast we all set out in different directions to search for food, but one by one we returned empty-handed. The first brought back only 2 small fish, and as each man trudged in, our spirits sank lower. We sat staring at each other, disheartened and silent, when suddenly in walked the last man. He carried a load of meat on his back, weighing about 100 pounds. He had come across and killed 2 large cow seals about 5 miles from home. We didn't waste a moment. After eating a quick meal, we all set off together to retrieve the rest of the meat. We had no time to lose. The tide was rising, and if we were caught out, there would be no way back. Several places on the shore are impassable at high tide, with 6 feet of water to contend with, and no other route around them. While we hurried back, Mr. Reynal and one of the men decided to take a shortcut through the bush to bypass a headland. As they passed, they spotted a young seal and gave chase. The animal bolted into a narrow gully about 30 feet deep with sheer sides. A stream of water flowed through the bottom, running under the rocks and emerging from a small hole at the beach. One of the men ran to guard the outlet while Reynal climbed down into the chasm. To his surprise, Reynal discovered a cavern, a hidden space that we had never noticed before. The cavern was divided in 2 by the stream, with each room about 40 feet long and 30 feet wide. The ceiling rose to about 20 feet, and at its center was a round hole that let in a flood of daylight. It was, in Reynal's words, a very comfortable place to live in. Meanwhile, the seal had no escape. It was cornered between Reynal and the man outside, and though it tried to fight, it was quickly subdued. It turned out to be a 1-year-old bull seal, a welcome addition to the 2 cows already killed. Reynal and his companion pressed on and soon stumbled upon a cow seal with her calf. After a fierce struggle with the mother, they managed to kill the calf and then started for home. They were behind us by an hour, and by then the tide had risen so high they were forced to swim across several of the flooded places, carrying their load of meat. We were all drenched to the skin. Rain had fallen heavily since noon, and it has not let up since. Even now, at 9 o'clock at night, the rain still pours. But we are grateful beyond words, for Providence has once again provided for us, when it seemed all hope was lost. Sunday, April 16th, 1865. Winter has arrived, and it has struck with a vengeance. Since the 3rd of April, an unrelenting gale has raged, bringing constant hail, snow, and freezing rain. The weather has been so severe that we've been almost completely unable to work on the boat. Still, through sheer perseverance, Despite many a wet jacket, we have pushed on. We now have only the planks to put on, and with 2 or 3 days of good weather, we will finish. Then we must wait for a calm to launch her. It is astonishing how much work this little boat has required. By the time she is finished, there will be about 700 nails and spikes in her. Reynal has fashioned every single one from short, broken bolts, painstakingly welding and drawing them out. It is hard, slow work, but we have no choice. Food once again remains our constant concern. Seals have become scarce, and we have not seen any in the water for weeks. If we are to survive, we must finish the boat soon and prepare to leave. Friday, June 23rd, 1865. It has been over 2 months since I last wrote, when I expected we would leave within 3 days. But as the saying goes, man proposes and God disposes. In these 2 months, we have faced some of our greatest trials and difficulties yet. First, when we tried to plank the boat, we discovered the planks would not bend, despite our best attempts to steam them. This forced us to almost rebuild the boat entirely and cut planks from the bush ourselves. The task was painfully slow and exhausting. Our saw needed sharpening every half hour, but we persevered. Next, we were buried under snow for 3 weeks, followed by relentless heavy rains and stormy weather. Despite the miserable conditions, I pushed myself to keep working, and as a result, we all fell ill with a violent attack of dysentery. Though we have since recovered, I've been left with lingering rheumatic pains and cramps that may cling to me for the rest of my life. My clothing by this point is utterly deplorable, a bundle of rags unworthy of description. Adding to our woes is grim starvation, gnawing constantly at our bowels. Yet thank God, we are at last on the point of either surmounting or ending this wretched existence. The boat is finally finished, rigged, sails bent, and ready for launching. But the weather is so dreadful that launching her is impossible. In the meantime, we survive on roots and water. The last of our salted and dried seal meat, long reduced to shriveled chips, is now being used sparingly, and with surprising relish. We shoot seagulls, or any other unfortunate birds that stray too close, but every edible thing seems determined to stay out of our reach. In all this time, we have caught just 1 seal, and the state of the poor beast was a shocking testament to the savagery of these creatures. One of the men found it in a remote place where it had evidently crawled to die. Its 4 flippers had been torn away, one entirely, the other severed at the joint. Its lower jaw was broken, with the flesh torn from underneath, and a strip of skin had been ripped all the way down its belly. Another strip ran down its back, leaving the bone completely exposed from head to tail. How it managed to crawl out of the water is beyond me. Whether it was attacked by 1 seal or several, I cannot say, but it was a cow carrying a calf. We have not gone hungry for lack of effort. We have constantly searched for food. With the boat afloat, I am sure we could find as much as we need. Once we launch her, we will immediately stock up and set off with the first favorable wind. Despite everything, I believe we have done a fine job with the boat. She is a neat, substantial little vessel, almost yacht-like in appearance, though small. Our work has been solid, but I cannot say the same for her old bottom. If it holds, we are saved. If it fails, we sink. And I would honestly prefer that fate to the unrelenting bodily suffering and mental torture of this place. But no more dark thoughts. Let me focus instead on our imminent deliverance and the hope of returning to those I hold dear. This evening marks a milestone. The boat is ready for launching. There are still small preparations to finish, and even now Reynal works tirelessly at the forge. It is 1:30 in the morning, and I hear the ring of his hammer as he completes his last job. Reynal has been remarkable throughout all of this, working late into the night, often until midnight, with surprising skill and determination. As for myself, I have worked harder with my hands in the past 9 months than in my entire lifetime. But I must not complain, for without such effort, I doubt I would be alive to write these words. My book is nearly full, and I am not sure I will find another scrap of paper to continue writing. On the island's animals. About 6 weeks ago, we made an unexpected discovery, a domestic cat. We found her in the forge, where she must have sought warmth after nightfall. At first, we kept her in a box for a few days, and then tied her near the fire. To our surprise, she soon seemed content and at ease in her new surroundings. One day, the strap around her neck broke, and she disappeared. For a while, we thought she had gone for good, but she soon reappeared, this time in the forge. Since then, she has become a regular nocturnal visitor, taming quickly, and even allowing us to pet her. She has been invaluable, as she cleared the house of mice, which had plagued us terribly. It is possible that there are many cats on this island, hidden during the day. Judging by the numerous burrows around the bay, I believe these cats, or some other animal, are far more common than we realized. Tuesday, June 27th, 1865. At last, we launched the boat. It was a perfect calm, which was fortunate, for once she was in the water, we found her alarmingly tender. The slightest movement sent her nearly to her beam ends. Some of the men were frightened and would have gladly returned to shore, but I assured them she would not capsize so long as the ballast, mainly salted sealskins, remained in place. Despite my assurances, I was deeply disappointed. I began to doubt whether it would be prudent to attempt the crossing in her at all, at least not in her current state. I hoped I could make further alterations to improve her stability. We rowed the boat to Camp Cove, about 7 miles away, arriving just after dark. There, we pitched our makeshift tent and unloaded what little equipment we had brought. For the next 2 weeks, we endured severe weather, gales howling from every point of the compass. Camp Cove proved an excellent anchorage, well sheltered, and with good holding ground. During this time, we reconfigured the ballast and changed the rigging from a cutter to a lug sail and jib, which I judged more suitable. However, I soon realized the boat could not safely carry all 5 of us. I proposed to the men that 2 should remain on the island while I and 2 others attempted to reach New Zealand. If we succeeded, I promised to return immediately with help. The proposal was met with unanimous opposition. One of the men summed up their feelings. Well, if any of us are to be drowned, let us all drown together. Final preparations and departure, July 1865. I endeavored to convince the men of the folly of risking all our lives in the boat, and explained that had anyone else been capable of navigating it, I would have gladly remained behind. After all, if those in the boat perished, those left on the island might still have a chance of rescue sooner or later. My arguments, however, had little effect. The men were afraid to go, but equally unwilling to be left behind. I saw now that I would face trouble convincing them to proceed. Despite my growing concerns that the boat was unsuitable to carry us all, I remained anxious for us to leave together. Yet prudence could not be ignored. On the 13th of July, after days of deliberation, I took 2 of the men, George Harris and Henry Polgy, back to the old camp at the wreck. These 2 had always gotten along well, and Polgy in particular had shown a strong reluctance to go in the boat at all. I deemed them the best candidates to leave behind and gave them everything we could spare. Renal and I returned to Camp Cove that same day, ready to depart at the first opportunity. Departure, July 19th, 1865. For several days after, the weather was extremely poor, and we grew dangerously short of food. On the 18th, however, the weather moderated, and we managed to catch a young seal and a few shags, birds I had previously referred to as widgeons. These we cooked that evening in anticipation of a fair wind the following day. The morning of July 19th broke fine and promising. At 8 a.m., a light air came from the south, and by 11 a.m., we set sail from Camp Cove with the first squall of a sou'wester. Such winds rarely blow with moderation for more than 12 hours and typically end in a hard gale. My hope was to make as much progress as possible before the full strength of the gale overtook us. We did not, however, make it more than 20 miles from the island before the full fury of the southwest gale hit us. The wind continued to rage until our arrival at Port Adventure, Stewart Island, on the morning of July 24th after a miserable 5-day passage. The harrowing voyage. The passage was one of unrelenting hardship. For the entire 5 days and nights, I remained on my feet, holding onto a rope with one hand and pumping water with the other. The boat was leaking constantly, requiring near continuous pumping. My anxiety would not allow me to leave the deck, so I performed this task while the other 2 men relieved each other at the helm. The wind, though fair, was so intensely strong that we were forced to lie to nearly half the time. The sea repeatedly broke over our small, fragile craft, and I scarcely know how she survived. I ate nothing during the voyage, not a single ounce of food, and drank only about half a pint of water. Remarkably, I felt no fatigue until the night before we landed, when exhaustion overwhelmed me. For the first time since leaving the island, the deck was free of water washing over it. I lay down for half an hour and rose again, just strong enough to hold out until we reached land. Had the voyage lasted even a day longer, I am convinced I would never have set foot on shore again. On the morning of July 24th, we landed at Port Adventure, where we were kindly received by Captain Cross of the Flying Scud. When I stepped ashore, I was so weak I could not stand. I had to be led to Captain Cross's house, where a meal was prepared for us. Though I partook of it sparingly, I felt very ill and unable to eat much. My companions were as worn out as I was. After the meal, I was given a warm bath and put to bed, where I remained until late that evening. By the following morning, after a good night's rest, I felt considerably better. Captain Cross informed me that he would be sailing to Invercargill, and in gratitude for his kindness, I presented him with our boat, requesting that he name her the Rescue. He later told me they hoisted English colors on her that morning and gave her the name I had chosen. And that's it for today, folks. What a daring, nail-biting, hold-your-breath kind of journey to safety this has been. Honestly, I don't know if I would have had the courage or sheer stubbornness to make it through those icy waters and endless challenges. I mean, imagine battling the elements, wrestling with fate, and holding on to hope with nothing but grit and a little divine intervention. Could I have done it? Probably not. But hey, that's why these stories are so captivating. They remind us that even in the wildest situations, the human spirit and a good dose of teamwork can prevail. Now, here's the deal. We're not quite done yet. Oh no, the grand finale is coming in the next episode, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. We're going to wrap up this incredible tale and reflect on what it all means. Faith, perseverance, and how to survive when life throws a shipwreck at you, metaphorically, of course. Until then, stay safe, stay inspired, and may God bless you abundantly. Whether you're navigating calm waters or stormy seas in your own life, remember, you're never truly alone. Take care, and I'll see you in the final episode. You won't want to miss it.